He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Hey folks, welcome. It is the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast with Dr. Philip Ovadia. We've got a guest here this week, Phil, that we were just talking about before we started recording. In one way or another, pretty well everybody knows this last name. And when I saw the last name, I assumed he was just coincidentally happened to have the same last name. But it turns out he is pretty much who I thought he might be. And that's all I'm going to say, because this is going to be a really different Stay Off My Operating Table. Phil, introduce our guest and then tell us why the heck he's here.
Yeah, definitely. It is a true honor to have Tom Ziglar with us today. And as you know, as you said, everyone knows the last name Ziglar. Tom's dad, Zig Ziglar, legendary business and life guru and coach. And Tom, in his own right, is now, I would say, a legendary life and business coach. And I met Tom a couple of years ago at a business growth conference and got to know him a little bit. And I will get into, it turns out that I inadvertently, I guess, had some influence on Tom. And that's really what brings him here today to talk about his health journey. And really excited to have that and to talk a little bit about, get Tom's sort of different perspective as someone who doesn't necessarily come from the health focused space, but more of an overall life optimization space and how he now views health playing into that. Before we get into all of that, maybe I'll give Tom a chance just to go into a little bit of his background, maybe talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in the Ziglar household and what kind of got him to where he is today.
Dr. Ovadia, gosh, what a pleasure to be here. It's like timing is everything. And I had, when we met 2 years ago in October in Reno at that conference, you gave me your book and how to stay off my operating table. Well, the title just kind of hit me, captured me. And something you should know is I get probably one or two books a week from people. And I read the first chapter in your book and it just captivated me. And I had started kind of a recommitment to my health in April. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm blessed to be the CEO of the Zig Ziglar Corporation and Ziglar Inc. I've been the CEO there for 30 years now. Got to work with my dad, Zig Ziglar. And of course, he really had an impact in the world. We estimate that he impacted over 250 million people in his life. Millions of books sold. There was a 30-year stretch where he spoke over 30 times a year to over 20,000 people at each event. I mean, just
I don't think 250 million is remotely near enough. That it's got to be more than that.
And it's crazy because, like overseas, he's more revered than he is here. And the reason for that is in the West, we kind of have this academic, analytical, what is motivation? Anyway, I'd rather talk about numbers and widgets. But in the rest of the world, especially, your attitude and your philosophy and the way you approach it is the key, right? You got to have both, right? And Dad was never one or the other. He was always both. But we know that your attitude and your outlook, your mindset and your belief is going to have a bigger determining factor in you sticking with something than the results that you get. Because people join the gym in January and they quit in February and they've lost weight. But their mind hasn't. And so I had that privilege. I started working at the company right after college. The reason I went to work at the company right after college is I had a golf habit. I wanted to be a professional golfer, and I was traveling all over and I needed something to pay the bills. And I realized those guys are really good. And went into sales at the company about that same time, just fell in love with the sales. I finally figured out what dad did. And when you can be a small part of helping somebody create the life that they want, as you know, there's nothing better than that, right? There's nothing better than that. People would come up to dad and say, "You changed my life." And he would say, "I provided you with some inspiration and some information, but you did all the work." He'd always congratulate them because you can't do it for somebody. You have to do it on your own. So in our journey, dad passed away 13 years ago. And we now have our primary focus is we work with coaches. We certify coaches in life, leadership, and sales. I've been all over the world on the leadership book that I wrote that came out a couple of years ago. And that's been an awesome thing. So we work at the top levels of corporate America and individuals who just want to be, do, and have more. But my legacy and what I'm trying to do is to equip others to share this message. And so that's what keeps me going. It's just really a blessing when and we live in kind of a strange world where it's been a little dangerous sometimes to just share obvious truth. But I believe we have a moral responsibility to give somebody the best chance they can have of being successful. And so one of my mentors, he says, "I don't bathe you in warm butter," because now you should eat the butter. You shouldn't bathe in it, but you know what I mean? And so we've always had a really neat place in the world where we got accepted everywhere, whether it's education or government or corporate, Fortune 500 small business, because dad just laid a foundation of being able to tell people what they needed to hear in a way they wanted to hear it. And so that's what we're up to. We've got hundreds of coaches all over the world, and we do events and conferences, and we really serve individuals into helping them step in and become the person that God created them to become. So that's a little bit about us. And when I met Dr. Ovadia 2 years ago, that book, it was just a timing thing, and it just really captivated me.
You can't say it was a timing thing and then not tell us why. What's that all about? Come on.
Yeah, I'll just share, like, about 15 years ago, I was I was just a Pillsbury Doughboy. I was a bit, I think I was wearing, I grew up in husky size clothes. I was the generation that kind of created that. Really, from the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I've always carried at least an extra 20 pounds. So I had an extra 70, and I I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I kind of created my own diet, and I called it the pure and simple diet. And what it was, if it was just pure, meant eat food the way God made it. It was kind of before the Whole Foods diet came along. This was 15 years ago, and I lost 70. Surprisingly, I just lost 70 pounds, and I was never hungry. Life gets on you, and you do things, and you kind of forget that commitment. And I gravitated back up, and then I think when we met, I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now. I wasn't near as bad as I was, but I wasn't in good shape. And so I'd made a commitment in April that I was going to work out every day. And so one of the things that I like to do in goal setting is to create a goal that's not DOA, which is dead on arrival. And so I said, "What's a workout?" And so if it meant going to the gym, that was DOA, because there's no way with my schedule I could go to the gym every day. So I just defined it as 30 minutes of intentional movement, and it didn't have to be in a row. And then I had to come up with the excuse of, what's one reason that I wouldn't work out? And the only reason I could come up with was a doctor's orders. Since April of 3 years ago, I've worked out every day. I'm on a streak. And so I guess I'd been doing it since April. So what is that, like 5 months when we met? And I hadn't lost any weight. So go figure. I think I'd gotten maybe a little more muscle, but
That would make sense. Yeah.
no weight. So I read the book, And I'm like, I'm doing this. And I knew instinctively it would work because I'd done something similar. But there was something in the book that you said, because I'd tried keto and before, and I was just hungry all the time. But the thing you said in the book was make sure that you get enough fat in there. And when I started getting enough fat, it was like everything changed. And so just probably just about everybody who does it, I lost 25 pounds and a bunch of inches very quickly. And so I hit my goal about 2 weeks ago. I wanted to, with metabolic, I wanted to get my waist size under 40. And when I started, it was 47 and a half, and now it's just over 39. And once I started making the progress and just made it my lifestyle, I really wasn't in a hurry to get there as much as I was just making sure I was staying in that. But the other thing that your book did is it led me to all your friends. And so I started like reading and listening to other people who you recommended, through your Twitter feed and other things like that. And so then I followed it up. I really love Brain Energy by
Yeah,
Dr.
Chris Palmer. Yeah.
Yeah, just, and of course, for me, in our business, it's all about mindset. And just to intuitively know, but then see a scientific reason as to why our what we eat really determines our mental outlook, our mood, and if you do it wrong, you're going to get issues, and if you do it right, you're going to have a better chance for success. And so all those things led to one thing to another. And I actually sent you a little note probably about a month ago, just thanking you for the difference that you made in my life. And I've shared your book, I don't know, with our community, dozens and dozens of times over the last couple of years. So it really is an honor to be here.
Well, I
mean, like your dad said, I didn't do it. I was just fortunate to be able to, put this information in front of you, or maybe even back in front of you. It's interesting to hear that you had instinctually done this in the past, and then, but maybe seeing it sort of more validated, I think, is what it oftentimes takes for people, because it's not unusual that I am talking with someone or working with someone and, kind of explaining this, and they're like, yeah, just makes sense, right? Eat real food. I mean, this isn't complicated. And, I certainly wasn't the first one to figure this out by any means. But it's interesting to hear you talk about it in that way, and to talk about, how important the mindset and the consistency really is, right? And I know, I've heard you tell the stories of kind of your dad's approach to health, and, your dad went through a similar transformation where he realized that he needed to be healthier to fulfill his mission. And, it certainly has helped me to hear from you how your dad has thought about this stuff, and to draw upon, a lot of your dad's philosophy and your philosophy, what you talk about in your books, just about the mindset part of this. And I think that is really so important, because one without the other, right? I can give the best information in the world, right? But if it's not done in a way that changes people's minds, it's not going to go very far. And of course, having a great mindset without the proper information also probably isn't going to take you very far in the end. So talk about maybe how you think about that. Maybe talk a little bit about the sort of, whole life, the wheel of life, I believe is how you refer to it, and how all of these areas interact with each other in your mind.
Yeah. So my dad has a quote. This was one of my favorite of his quotes growing up. And he said, "You are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. And you can change what you are and where you are by changing what goes into your mind." So, in other words, we're just, as humans, we're the sum total of everything that's come in and then what we believe about that. And if we don't like the results, or we're not happy with the situation, then we can change our input. And so those 15 years ago, when I'm sitting there going, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I started eating that pure food approach. I started listening to and reading all kinds of articles, right? Because I'm like a constant learner. And so I simplified that Zig Ziglar quote and I made a Tom Ziglar quote. And basically, the quote says, "What you feed your mind determines your appetite." And that's literal and figuratively. Okay. So,
What you feed your mind determines your appetite.
and so for everybody listening, the key here is if you're on a health journey, if you can put 10 to 20 minutes a day into your mind of listening to someone who is an expert in health, right? In nutrition or exercise or mindset or something like that. When you feed your mind that, you're going to want more of it. It's just, imagine you've been eating right for the first time and you've got three weeks under your belt, and then all you can do is, sit in a cafeteria and smell food and get commercials. I mean, it's not going to be long before you lose. It's just, and so we've got to constantly be feeding our mind the right thing. And because once you do that, now what's really interesting to me is when I went on it, I was like, okay, so once a month, I'm gonna have a day where I just eat what I want. And the first 4 or 5 months, gosh, I was like craving that day like you wouldn't believe. And then something flipped to where I don't even care. And it's like I can literally feel my body working differently when I'm putting stuff in that I know is going to bog me down. It's really interesting how that shift, it takes some time. It takes a while for it to happen, but it does happen. And so now that's my mindset. Hey, you know what? If I'm going to have Thanksgiving and I'm going to have some pie and some stuffing, you know what? That's okay. But as I'm eating it, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't taste like it used to. It's really, and it's kind of not worth it. So I end up having just enough and just going back on it and never feeling deprived or worried or anything like that. But at the same time, like I've probably read at least 20 or 25 books since Stay Off My Operating Table in that same vein of thought, just health and nutrition. And for me, that's really important because what you feed your mind determines your appetite. And so I'm always kind of just keeping that mind honed on what's the next thing and what's the next thing. And interestingly, I've had a fantastic functional medicine doctor for 6 or 7 years, and he is the epitome of what you talk about and and what we do and teach. And he's telling me all the same stuff. You know, he spends 90 minutes with me on my blood work. I mean, just incredible. I mean, all the things that you do. So that's why I say the timing is really interesting, how somebody's words and language and the way you presented it just hit me perfectly. My doctor's grateful for you. Just to,
I think it's interesting from a timing standpoint that you're here. We're closing in on 200 episodes, and I literally just in the last couple of weeks, I've thought, um, anybody who's been paying attention to us for a while is hearing the same thing over and over again. And without having any agenda, I just had the thought, gee, I wonder where we're going to go from here. And then to have somebody who coaches thinking, I guess is really what it is, show up on the show, to me, that is perfection. There's going to be a lot of people who um, know what you're all about, know what the Ziglar companies are all about, but there's going to be a lot of folks listening to this who don't. And I think it'd be cool if you would think about folks who've never really embraced the root of that idea you just shared, that how you what you put into your mind determines your appetite. It makes sense to me. But I've been somebody who's been a big believer in mindset and what you believe, all of that for decades. And there's going to be folks who are skeptical or clueless. I'd love for you to address both of those as it regards to metabolic health.
You bet. So I'm like very simple. So I like to keep things super simple and I love formulas. So I'm going to give you like three formulas. So I was speaking in Australia and this guy, it was like I was going all day. It was an all day business conference and I was teaching the whole thing. And so right before the first break, this guy raises his hand and he says to me, Tom, it's questions, right? So he says, what's the fastest way to success? And so I just blurted, because I'd never heard that question before. It's always, what do successful people do? Or what do you think three keys to success are? But I kind of like that. I want to know the fastest
To
way
the
to
chase.
success. And so I just blurted out, the fastest way to success is to replace bad habits with good habits. And I didn't even know I'd said it. So we went to break, came back in. The guy who's hosting the event's a really good friend. And he starts off the second session where he's bringing me back up. It's his audience. He says, hey, did you hear what Tom said right before the break? Get your pen out. Tom said the fastest way to success is to replace bad habits with good habits. And so I kind of looked to the left and right, like I said that. So I wrote that down because that was pretty good. I Googled it that night. Nobody had that quote. So I claimed it. And that became an anchor quote for the book Choose to Win that I wrote. And so the first formula is if you want to be more successful in anything, whether it's health or business or family relationships or you name it, finances, just start thinking, what are the bad habits that I have? And what's a good habit that I could replace it with? So if you're drinking a sugar soft drink, I think nobody argues that's not a bad habit. A good habit could be what? I could replace it with water. We need more water. That's 17 pounds a year for the average person. I mean, that's like a crazy simple thing. And you just use that simple formula. So if I'm not achieving what I want, if my blood work isn't good, if I can't keep up with my grandkids, what's going on? What are the bad habits that you could replace with good habits that would start doing that? And you don't have to um, change the world overnight. You could just do one bad habit for a good habit a week, a little one, and just stack them. And it's incredible what happens. So that's like a formula.
That's a
And
good
then
one.
go ahead.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Then the second one is we have this, I call it the Ziglar performance formula. And it's attitude times effort times skill equals performance. And so look how simple this is. When you go to a restaurant, how do we judge them? We judge them on their attitude. We walk in and we're like, are they glad to see me? Are they smiling? Am I feel welcome? And then the second thing we do is we judge them on their effort. And the effort is, did they seat me quickly? Did I get my water right away? Were they attentive in the ordering process? Are they walking with intention? And the third thing is skill. So was the food cooked right? Did they serve it correctly? I mean, all these things are key, but it's all three that make the difference: attitude, effort, and skill. And so if we're trying to increase our performance and our health, people tend to neglect one of those three things, right? So it's all going to be about effort, right? Well, if I'm just I was working out for 5 months and didn't lose any weight. So my effort was up, but I was missing a pretty important ingredient. And so I had to hone the skill. The reason I've been roller coaster like everybody else I know is it's because my attitude was going up and down, right? I wasn't feeding my mind. And so if every day we're on a journey, we're just thinking, okay, what attitude can I work on today? What mindset can I do that's going to give me a better chance for success? And then what effort, is it preparing meals in advance? Is it, waking up 30 minutes early so I can get my exercise in? What is it? And then what's the skill and how can I get just a little bit better at that? And it's funny when you get involved in a community, it's just amazing to me how many little tips you pick up
What's the skill? Talk about what's the skill? How
That's
does skill apply to taking care of yourself? I love the idea. The formula makes a lot of sense. Attitude, effort, skill. But I'm thinking, I don't know, what do I get better at?
Yeah, so you make a commitment, I'm going to start working out. So you start working out and then you're like, I need some resistance training. I got to get some muscles. And then you start reading, right? Because you're feeding the mind. And then you learn that the number one predictor of an early death once you get to 65 is a fall, right? Because you lose your mobility and everything cascades. So what keeps you from having a fall? You got to have muscle strength and bone density. And so I need to go talk to a trainer. That's the skill I got to increase because if I don't have much coordination or muscle base or whatever, I'm going to hurt myself. I know me, right? So what's the skill that I need to increase, right? Exercise is not just an effort, it's a skill. It's actually all three, right? It's an attitude, it's an effort, and a skill. Eating is probably all three, right? It's my approach to it. So does that help with that answer?
Yeah, it does. It's
Yeah.
so intensely practical. I guess I was thinking more kind of at a meta level, at a kind of an ethereal level, but we're talking extremely practical.
And then the third formula or the third thing, it's not really a formula, but it's just we just got to get really good at questions. So I read all these books and I could give you a whole list, but you've already, a lot of them are recommended by you. But I thought, the problem is we go to our doctor and we ask the wrong question. And I'm not talking about Dr. James, who's my functional medicine guy, because he's he started his practice to address the issue that we're talking about. But I'm just talking about your typical overworked, stressed doctor who is, mainstream. If you go in and you ask them, hey, what do I need to do to be healthy? They're going to say, eat right and exercise and take this.
And take this pill.
So the better question is, if I'm be 60 in February. So if I make it to 60 and my goal is to be 85 and chasing my grandkids on the beach, what are the top 5 health concerns that could take me out that I need to avoid? We know what those are, right? Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer, right? We know the list.
Yeah.
So then my question should be, so what can I do now to make sure I don't get that? And how they answer that question is going to tell you whether they know what's going on or not, because the precursor to all of those is metabolic syndrome, right? And what causes that? It's insulin resistance, right? It's how do I fix that? Oh, you need a low carb ketogenic diet. So really, if they don't say, you know what, you need to avoid insulin resistance at all costs, and you should eat a that's what you should do. If you do that, you'll be metabolically well, which will decrease your chances 5 or 10 times for each one of those things. So I'm a big believer. The third formula is think really hard about the question that you're going to ask, because even the Dr. Chat GPT got that question wrong.
No.
Yeah. I went to Chat GPT and I said, why, what is it, of all the animals on earth, why are humans the most advanced and have, what's our strategic advantage? And it got it right. It said our brain. And I said, because it's not our claws, it's not our speed, it's our brain. We're able to talk and communicate and strategize and plan and think. And I said, how did humans get big, smart brains? And it said, for millions of years or however long, they had a diet that allowed that. And I said, what diet was that? And it said, we believe that their diet was 70% fat and protein during the development of the brain. And I said, wow, so why is the American food pyramid recommend the opposite? It's
And suddenly we discovered where ChatGPT's political backers stand.
right. So it just kind of like you could just feel the machine smoking. And all that to say is that, I mean, whether you believe in that timeline or not, if science says that our reasoning ability came from our diet, and our diet that gave us that was this basically protein fat diet with seasonal stuff, then we would kind of be anti IQ if we recommended something else than that, which weird. I mean, that's just weird. So
And
anyway,
and yet somehow here we are, right? And it's interesting, right? Again, the timing, a theme we've talked about. So as we're recording this, we're 2 weeks out from the election, and of course, I think one of the biggest topics around changes that Trump is planning is this health initiative led by Robert Kennedy. And so it's very interesting to see at least an acknowledgement of the problem, right? Because in a lot of ways, this was just a problem that no one would ever talk about, right? We had horrible health, but it just was, it seemed like something that people didn't want to address what got us here. And
Yeah.
the what you just laid out, right, in your conversation with ChatGPT, it makes perfect sense, right? We're here because we started recommending we do something than what got us here in the first place, right? And it's really, I think, what a lot of people are talking about, myself and a lot of the metabolic health movement, is really just, it's not doing something different. It's like you said, it's replacing the bad habits, but it's going back to the habits that we had before of eating real food, getting a good amount of activity in our day, things like getting out in the sun and just simple things like that, that it turned out are the key to undoing the damage that we've now done. I wanted to kind of get your sense on how this plays into life overall, right? How important is this? People come to you and they come to the Ziglar organization, they're really looking, maybe I would say, I'm guessing a lot of them are kind of hyper focused on the business aspects, maybe the monetary aspects of this. But what have you seen in terms of, where the health piece of it fits in for someone that's just looking for more business success? Why should they pay attention to their health?
yeah, a couple of things just to make a comment on the general political climate. And I think many people just realizing, hey, we just need to see the data. We need to understand where we are and figure out how to fix it. I studied Hebrew in kind of Jewish tradition, not in a scholarly academic way, but just as kind of a hobby. And rabbis for eons, I mean, for generations, they would get together from different schools of theology, and they would come together and they would get around tables and they would argue like crazy. And then when it was done, they would stay at each other's houses and their kids would grow up together and they'd be best friends. And it's this principle of they were arguing to discover the truth, not to win the argument.
God, that is good.
And that's really the spirit that we need right now is we need people from the different positions to come in, not biased, protecting their turf, but to discover the truth. And if you look at the domino effect of how we got here, one of the big dominoes was at the end of World War One, 3 million Americans had moved into the cities. And the department, I mean, the United States was worried about a famine, right? And so they were like really worried about we've got far fewer farmers than we've ever had. And if a famine comes, we could be in real trouble because that was a deal. And so that's when they started subsidizing farmers. But what they didn't anticipate was the technology that allowed the growth of crops, it would accelerate 5 to 10 times. And so we suddenly had surplus. And then had another problem, right? And then they had another. And so they started making all these decisions. But instead of saying, how do we feed America? If the question had simply been, how do we create a healthy American? Could you imagine how different the outcome, generation after generation would be, right? If health was our thing. And so we need to argue to discover the truth. On the mindset, when we get together with companies, like when we do corporate training or when we do individuals, it doesn't really matter. If we ever do goal setting, and you can do it in a very business sense, this is our big objective and how are we going to get there, planning and strategy. We have a 7-step goal setting process. And it works the same whether you want to grow your business by 20 million or whether you want to lose 20 pounds. It's the same 7 steps that you got to take, right? But there's 2 goals that people always write down. One is a health goal and one is a financial goal. These are like the stakes in the ground. And so our health impacts every area of our life, our mental, our spiritual, our family, our personal, our financial, and our career. And this is something that I've really spent a lot of time thinking on. And my wife and I, we were at a park 3 weeks ago, and we're just sitting there enjoying it. We're getting our sun. I've read about it. I'm just asking this question. Like the more carnivore you go, like the less sunburns you get. I mean, like for me, that's been like real. Is that real?
It's real. Yeah.
Okay. So I went fishing and I mean, so anyway, we're out at the park getting our sun and these 5 girls walk by and they're like in their early 20s and they're all overweight and 3 of them are obese. Like you can look into their future and go, there's a lot of heartache coming.
Yeah.
And not just medical problems, but relationship and self-image and all those things that happen. And I turned to my wife and I said, I used to judge them and say they just don't have discipline. And I said, now I just believe they're a product of the system. And so I connect that. I'm kind of a connector. If somebody wants to create the life they want and their diet is not right, it's going to prevent their brain from functioning and being clear and to have clarity in the decisions they need to make. It's going to limit the capacity for what they could accomplish. Not just from a physical energy, like I don't have the stamina, which is real. I'm talking about the quality of your decisions. And so our mindset is so key. We've got to have the right mindset. But if you're feeding your system fuel that bogs it down, then here's a formula. This is another one. So my life statement is this: feed the M&M. Feed the mind and the mitochondria.
Oh, I like that.
So I will
Feed
actually
the mind and the mitochondria.
I'll like look at something and go, the mitochondria be happy if I eat that. That's really simple.
That's actually really good.
I mean, and so success in life now, from an overall perspective, we got to feed the mind and we got to feed the mitochondria.
And replace the bad habits with the good ones.
Yeah. Einstein, was it Einstein who said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results?
Yeah.
So I like that, but I'm going to one up him because I actually think it's the definition of insanity is thinking the same thing over and over again and expecting different results because our thoughts precede our actions, right? Yeah. Thoughts create beliefs and beliefs actions. So if all you left from today was feed the M&M, if that's it, if that's the only formula you took and you applied it, you would win over time. There's just no way you could lose because feed the mind. What would I want to feed my mind? Envision the person you want to become, and what does that person need to become that person? You just feed your mind that. And then if you go and say, what do mitochondria need? It's pretty simple at that point.
It's really powerful. It's a powerful point of view to think about all these times I've tried to get healthy, and I've thought that the key to getting healthy was move more, do the right exercise, but I didn't really load the front end of that whole behavior change with a belief change. Not just that I should do this, but that everything that all my mind would be focused on that. And I know the place that an awful lot of people stumble. And my sister-in-law, for example, we've been talking to her about eating in a metabolically healthy way for years. And as soon as she heard that she had to give up bread, it was just, oh, I can't do that. That's just too hard. And we've seen here just in the last, I don't know, 2, 3 months, something switched inside her head. It wasn't in her body first, it was in her head. I can do this. I can try this. And naturally, unsurprisingly, she immediately reports how much better she's feeling and how sad she is that it took this long to get there. But it wasn't a behavior issue. It wasn't an inability to behave a particular way. What was it? How'd you describe it? Attitude, behavior, and skill?
Attitude, effort, and skill.
Attitude,
Yeah.
effort.
Effort and
It really
behavior.
wasn't an effort issue. It was an attitude issue.
Yeah.
It started between her ears. And as soon as she realized that she could do this, she could stop eating bread. She wasn't violating the laws of physics. She did and began seeing the results. There's way more here. I feel it. There's way more here than we've come remotely close to touching.
I think it's a lot about, like you said, asking better questions. I know is certainly something that was very important in my journey. It's only when I started asking different and better questions that I was able to really start to, change my attitude, change my mindset, and ultimately, have the success that I had, regarding my health journey and now being able to help others. I'd love for you to maybe give some of your best tips to our audience, right? You're someone who, a lot of people, right? They kind of make the excuses. I'm too busy and I travel too much and, I'm always working and, all of those things. And, you lead a large organization. I know you travel a lot. You certainly have a busy, work schedule. You have your family, which I know is very important to you. So how do you, operationalize this, right? What are some of the tips that you've learned along the way that you think might help others to put it into practice?
Yeah. So, gosh, one of the simplest ones I already talked about, which is start a streak. And in the streak, don't commit to something that's DOA, dead on arrival. Commit to something you can do. And so I've been to Australia and Vietnam since I started this. When you're on planes for, 17 out of 24 hours, how are you going to work out? Oh, that's actually pretty easy. You just walk fast around the airport terminals when you land. And when, it's like, you got 30 minutes, let's do this. You probably should be doing calf raises or squats on a long flight anyway for other reasons, right? I mean, and so I made my definition of working out 30 minutes very simple, intentional movement. And so 7 days a week, now almost 3 years in a row, 30 minutes of intentional movement. Some days it's a walk. Some days it's 3 10-minute walks. Other days I'm in a great gym and having fun and I've got more time. But So whatever goal that like whatever you want to do, just really hone in on that. And then gosh, the killer bad habit is ultra processed foods. And so if we can just replace the bad habit of an ultra processed food with something that's a whole food, and then double down and make that substitute high protein, high fat something, wow, the satiation in your brain just kills the hunger appetite. I mean, it's really awesome. I do eat nuts, and so when I'm traveling, I've got my nuts with me, and sometimes some jerky that doesn't have any additives in it. It's just jerky, and I'll do that before dinner or something. It just makes it easier when I go in. But to be honest, I don't like, I'm not even hungry when I miss a meal now, which is bizarre. I mean, I never in my life, because I was constantly not every 90 minutes, just like clockwork, had to eat something. So that second tip is just have the healthy food that's going to satiate you to tide you through any of those tempting times until it's just a new habit. And then the third one is that feed your mind thing. I'm a big fan of Audible. I would just have a book on there constantly on some education that you can get. So think about it. If walking is your preferred exercise, or where you can listen while you're doing it, you're getting 30 minutes of feeding your mind while you're moving, and that will keep you inspired. The last tip is just start your day every single day. If you win the morning, you win the day. If you win the day, you win the week. You win the week, you win the month, you win the month, you win the year. And so for me, I've just got that first, and you don't have to start big. You can start 10 or 15 minutes. Just get up, have that little bit of quiet time, write your gratitude list. Gratitude and fear can't exist in the same place. So maybe write 3 things you're grateful for, write your goals for the day, listen to something inspirational, meditate, pray, read a scripture, whatever it is, and just start your day with that intention, and it changes your whole day. Those are like the 3 or 4 tips that keep me going. And if I got a weird schedule, I just get up a little earlier. That's it. I mean,
You know what, Phil? This is so cool. I was thinking we've had some super like scientific, technically focused guests who go really deep into the biology and the chemistry and it's all cool. But this is the episode for people like me who sometimes feel like they've kind of lost. What is it that's most important? What do we do? Do I need to be taking this particular kind of subspecies of omega-3 or that particular kind? Which particular peptide is going to be best for this? Is awesome. This is applicable to everybody, always, everywhere. And never in a million years would I have thought that the Ziglar inspiration for just taking care of your mind, being a better person, would overlap with the Ovadia stay off my operating table philosophy in such a beautiful way. I want more of this personally. I want more of this.
We'll definitely have to get Tom back for part 2 sometime. And I also, I'm quite grateful for a lot of the people that I've met, along the way here. And Tom is certainly high on that list. And no, I never imagined either that somehow my health journey would lead me into the Ziglar universe. But it's just it continues to interest me to see all of these overlapping ideas and how they play into each other. And certainly a lot of what Tom and a lot of what Tom's dad talked about have helped me, not only my personal health journey, putting this all together for me, but also being able to, get that information out to help as many people as possible. And ultimately, I think that's a shared mission that we all have here. Really thankful that Tom and I connected, that our paths crossed, that we were able to resonate so well for each other and help each other get better at doing what we do. So thank you, Tom, for everything you do. And definitely would love to have you on again to dig deeper into this at some point. But in the meantime, tell people maybe how they can find your work and the Ziglar organization if somehow they haven't already.
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to Ziglar.com, and we have some free gifts over there, a newsletter, all that kind of good stuff. You can find out what we're doing. And one of the things I'm looking forward to, Dr. Ovadia, is in January, we're going to have you on a webinar for all of our audience to kind of bring your message. And so I'm real excited about that and working together. But Ziglar.com is where it is. If you got a question for me, my email is tom@ziglar.com. So pretty simple. I'm one of these weird people who reads emails. But, Dr. Ovadia, I'm reading Elon Musk's book. It's not his book, but it was a biography about him because of him in the news.
Oh, yeah.
And the biographer made this statement. He said, Elon, he commits to a mission, and then he figures out how to build a business. And that's what makes him unstoppable. And so I thought, gosh, that was my dad, right? He committed to a mission because he kind of almost invented a new business model because he was one of the early speakers. And that's kind of what you've done. You saw how it changed your life and the need for it. You've committed to a mission. And now the connections and all the people you're meeting and the people you're serving now, it's what makes you kind of unstoppable because you're sold out to the mission. So it was easy for me when you said, hey, you should come on, it was easy for me to see that because that's what I see in you is you've got this mission. And, there's a lot of voices out there who are saying similar things, but they're not always as kind and even balanced as the way you say it. So I appreciate that because we've always taught that you can win more people over by making them want what you have than telling them they're wrong. Right. And that's that idea of, if we want to argue, let's just argue to discover the truth. And so you just do a great job at that. And you've really helped me. So thank you for having me. And I look forward to continuing this journey. And if you'll have me back, I'd love to come. So if that was a soft or a hard invitation, either way, my answer is yes. So there we go.
That's fantastic. Wow. Tom, thanks so much. That website, folks, is Ziglar.com. And hey, he offered it, so I'm going to repeat it. You can reach him via email, tom@ziglar.com. We're grateful you were here. Phil, thanks for inviting this guy. I love our formulas. Show notes will have the contact information, and if I get my stuff together, might even have the formulas as well. Thanks for being with us, folks. This is the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. We're glad you were here. We'll talk to you next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.